So if you think of your happiness as a balloon, right? The bigger your balloon, the happier you are. What happens when you commit sins is that it tends to kind of poke holes in the balloon and deflate the balloon, okay? These habits, in turn, do the opposite. They actually fill up the balloon with air. And the way in which you fill up the balloon with air is through the exercises, okay? So that's the framework that we're going to use. And I'm going to start out with a sin that I think most of us are very, very familiar with, particularly in the business school context. It is chasing superiority. It's wanting to be better than other people. It's keeping up with the Jonases. And in fact, not just keeping up with them, but doing better than them, right? So why do we have that association in our mind? It turns out that being superior is actually a good thing for survival. If you're higher in status, if you're closer to the chief of the village, if you're more strong, if you're faster, if you're more beautiful, if you're more famous, if you're more powerful, if you're more in control, etc., it actually increases your chances of surviving. The big point that I want to make with all of this is that we often tend to think of seeking superiority or wanting to be superior, wanting to be better, wanting to be richer, etc., as a kind of a shallow goal, right? Not something that's worthy of pursuit, etc. But in reality, it is really deeply tied into very, very important goals that we have. So we want the love and adulation of other people. So lots of different goals are riding on the goal of being superior, okay? Superiority is an ironic goal. If you remember, we talked about happiness being an ironic goal. That is that you want to be happy, so to prioritize happiness is important, but if you chase it too directly, it actually lowers your chances of actually achieving it, okay? In a similar way, while being superior is a good thing from the standpoint of happiness, if you chase it too directly, it's going to harm you in terms of happiness. And I want to talk about a few reasons why that happens. Okay, so one reason is, and that's captured by the picture on the top, is that if you're a type who chases superiority, you're very explicit about wanting to be richer than other people and you show off a lot, etc., people are not going to really like hanging out with you. There is a concept in social psychology, it's called homophily, which is that we like to hang out with people who are similar to us. You know, birds of a feather flocking together. Have you guys heard of this expression, right? So if you are a vulture, the vulture is a metaphor for seeking superiority, then you're going to be surrounded by other vultures who are also going to show off. Why? Because the people who are not vultures are not going to like your company, right? You're the type to show off, you know, tom-tom your achievements, chest thump, etc. Other people who are not like that are not going to like your company. And so you're going to be left with people who are also the superiority seeking type. And especially if you're seeking superiority, you're not going to like the company of such people, right? Because you want to be the top guy and you're surrounded by people who are also similar.
Superiority and happiness. Before coming to this class, I was not sure how these two combine, but Professor Raghunathan shared a very great takeaway. And that was that never chase superiority, right? In this world, he told that we are seeing a lot of people are doing better than us. You know, there are people who are getting cars and bungalows. So he mentioned that what's important is to pursue the meaning of life, right? Do what makes you feel good rather than what the world is doing.
The second big reason for why chasing superiority lowers happiness has to do with the hedonic treadmill. So what happens when you chase superiority is that you invariably start comparing yourself to other people on so-called extrinsic yardsticks. And the third reason is that if you're chasing superiority, you invariably become more self-centered, right? It's all about you. You become egotistical, and therefore you're more likely to step on other people's feet, not act in an ethical fashion, and so on. And so this picture on the lower right, you should replace this love sign with a hate sign or a something danger sign or something like that. It's basically a karmic cycle, right? So if you're chasing superiority, you're going to do things that is going to bite you in the back because you're going to hurt other people in the process of chasing superiority. That's going to create negative karmic cycles for yourself. You know, people are not going to like it. So how do we solve this conundrum, right? So I want to propose a solution to this conundrum, and that is to pursue flow. And you might have heard of this expression called flow. I want to give you guys a little bit of background around it. So here are two gentlemen. The gentleman on your left is Viktor Frankl. Anybody familiar with this name? Right? Okay, why?
I've read his book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. Okay, very good. So Viktor Frankl was practicing psychiatrist in Vienna in the 1930s. And toward the late 1930s, and he was Jewish. You guys know what happened, right? Second World War started. And so he was arrested, not just him, also his family, his parents, his wife, his sisters, his siblings. They were all put in a concentration camp. Okay, and fast forward 6 years, everybody died in his family. Every single person died except him. He came close to death several times in the concentration camp. He was an emaciated self of himself when he got released. Basically, the Americans came and freed him. But he was actually psychologically enhanced, even though physically he had become a ghost of his former self because of starvation and stuff. Psychologically, he came out an enhanced man. And one of the reasons for that is that he said that he discovered the secret to being a happy person, even if life doesn't cooperate with you. Okay, so he obviously went through a very grueling experience when it came to his physical survival, right? But in the process of actually going through those 6 years in the concentration camp, he ended up figuring out what he called logotherapy was his kind of secret to leading a happy life. And logo, the term logo, L-O-G-O, means meaning. And therapy is therapy, of course, right? So his big idea is that as human beings, we are not just pleasure-seeking animals. We are not just, living things that want positive things to happen. We also seek a lot of meaning, okay? And what he meant by the word meaning is captured under both meaning and purpose in my framework. And then the gentleman on the right, his name is Csikszentmihalyi. That's how you spell the name, okay? And the mnemonic is that you pronounce it as cheeks sent me high, okay? Cheeks sent me high. So that's how you pronounce it. I had the pleasure of meeting him several times. So he wrote this book called Flow, and the big hypothesis that he's examining in the book is whether Viktor Frankl was right, whether a life of meaning, in fact, enhances your happiness levels in life. So the way that he went about testing this hypothesis was very, very interesting. So I'll tell you about one study that he conducted. He's conducted many studies like this. In one study, he had 800 participants, all in the city of Chicago. He was working for the University of Chicago. And these 800 participants were from a variety of different fields. Some of them were in the business field, others were in the science field, still others were in sports, and so on. And so he even had a bum, somebody who was homeless, like hanging around in the streets of Chicago as a participant in the study, okay? And he gave these participants two things. He gave them a journal to carry around with them, and he also gave them a pager. So this was a study conducted in the 1980s, okay? This was pre-cell phones, etc. You can imagine how you might change the study now because everybody has a smartphone. But anyway, back in the day, it was a pager. He gave them these two things. And he told them that this pager that I'm giving you is programmed to sound an alarm at various points in the day for the next 7 days, next week, right? And if your pager goes off and sounds an alarm, your task is to take out your journal and write in it whatever you're doing at that point in time. Let's say that, somebody's going to go to sleep. They would take out the journal and write, I'm going to go to sleep. Or somebody's in a meeting, they'd say that I'm in a meeting, and so on. And also indicate how happy or unhappy you are at that point in time. He wanted to find out if people report the highest levels of happiness when they're doing something that they consider to be meaningful, okay? And if they did, then that would be support for Viktor Frankl's hypothesis that meaning is very, very important in life. So that's what he did. And what he ended up finding was that Viktor Frankl was right? And he also found out that people reported not just the highest levels of enjoyment and pleasure and happiness, but also the highest level of meaning when they were in these so-called flow states. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 different characteristic features of flow. So the very first feature of flow, captured by the picture on the very top, is that there is a paradoxical perception of time when you go through flow experiences. Okay? So time seems to slow down in a flow experience, but once that experience is over and you look back on that experience, it seems that the whole experience went by really fast. So imagine that you get into flow playing a game of tennis. In the moment, it seems that everything is slow. You can reach balls that you would otherwise not be able to reach. A sense that you're able to cover more of the court because in relation to you, time has slowed down, so you're faster now, right, because of that. So there's that sense that time has slowed down in the moment. But after the match is over, you look at your watch, you might be like, I can't believe that I was playing for 3 hours. That took 3 hours? Really? Okay, so this is this paradoxical perception of time when it comes to flow experiences. The second feature of flow is that there is a lack of self-consciousness. Usually, when we go through life, there is a voice in the back of our head that's commenting, judging, criticizing, categorizing, etc., whatever it is that we're doing at every point in time, more or less, okay? So you can almost like think of it as static. There is static noise in the back of our head. That's part of what's called a default mode network. It's part of the brain which is constantly assessing how we are doing and what our prospects are and what's going on around us, okay? It's commenting on how we are doing compared to how well we want to do, okay? So in flow experiences, that voice is gone or close to being gone. You're so absorbed in the activity that there is no voice anymore. The third feature of flow, which kind of like, flows from the other features, if you will, is that there's an intense focus on whatever is going on right now. So imagine that you get into flow when climbing up a mountain, right, or a rock face. You wouldn't be thinking about, okay, what did I have for breakfast, or what am I going to do once I reach the summit? You'd be very much involved in the next sub-step, right? Is this the kind of plant that I, hoist myself up on, or is this kind of ledge broad enough for me to hold on to, or my fingers too damp? Do I need to powder them, etc.? So you'd be very much thinking about, not even thinking, you'd be experiencing the next step rather than thinking about what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. So those are three features of flow. So I want to throw out a question to you guys. How many of you guys have never ever had a flow experience in your life? Okay, how many of you have definitely had a flow experience in your life? Okay, it's amazing, right?
Many thoughts that I have resonated with, but one that stuck with me was the one with the flow model. So basically, it's something that I personally have experienced myself a lot of times, but it's not something that I've related to in terms of happiness before.
Not only did he identify these features of flow, he also identified when flow is most likely to happen. And so that's what this graph is about. So on the x-axis, you see available ability, how skilled you are for a particular task. Let's say the game of tennis. Let's say that, nowadays they have these UTRs in tennis, the Universal Tennis Rankings. Djokovic is like a 16 or something, and, beginner might be a 1, right? Let's say that you're like in the region of 8, which is very good, okay? Not like, champion level, but very good. Let's say you're an 8. So that's your available ability. Let's say that you're facing the opponent, which is who is also an 8, right? So then what happens is that the required and the available abilities are more or less at the same in this 45-degree line, right? So that's when flow is most likely to happen. If you are facing an opponent who is much better than you are, let's say you're an 8 and the opponent is a 9 or a 10, then you are in this region where required ability, right, in order to beat him is much higher than the available ability, and you're going to be anxious, right? You're not going to do well in this game, right? You're anxious about it. On the other hand, if the available ability is much higher, you're a 9 or a 10, and you're facing somebody who's an 8, then you're going to be probably bored, okay? Because the challenge is not stiff enough for you. So it's in this narrow ridge between available ability and required ability being equal, or more or less equal, that you experience flow. In fact, even a perfect match of available and required ability is not the most conducive for flow. You're most likely to experience flow when the amount of ability required of you is just a little bit higher than the available ability. So let's say you're playing an 8.1 or something like that, right? On UTR, you're an 8.0. You're playing somebody who's an 8.05 or 8.1. That's when you're likely to experience flow. Because in every moment of flow experience, you're growing and you're learning, because you have to, right? In order to kind of rise up to the challenge. If you string together enough for flow experiences in your life, then you have no option but to become a master of what you are doing, right? So imagine somebody who's strung together 10,000 hours of flow experiences in tennis. Chances are they're going to be very, very, very good, because in every moment of those flow experiences, they've been challenged. But not too much, right? Not so much that they've lost hope and are anxious. Not too little, then they're bored, but just enough that in every moment they've been growing and growing and growing, and you add up 10,000 hours of growing, then there's no option but for you to be very, very good at what you do. And I'm just presenting this as an alternative to chasing superiority, as a means of getting better at what you do, okay? And if you pursue this path to becoming better at what you do and becoming superior, then it doesn't come at the cost of some of those things that we talked about. When you chase superiority, right, it lowers your happiness levels. But when you pursue flow, chances are it doesn't. It's a win-win.
The discussion about how practicing something for 10,000 hours has led people to achieving mastery of stuff has really helped me decide about how I want to go about further in my life and my career. And this is something which I feel I'll be executing in my life going forward.
This session was on a very interesting topic. Of course, all topics are interesting, but this one was particularly interesting because it's something that a lot of MBA students can relate to. This idea of chasing superiority. What we know from the research is that while having superiority, that is being richer and so on, is good for happiness, chasing it too directly is not very good. And so how do you achieve superiority, so to speak, without chasing it? And so I propose a solution to this kind of conundrum. And the solution is to pursue flow. Flow is this experience where you're so immersed in the activity that you lose track of time and it's intrinsically motivating and so on. And if you do that consistently enough, then you're going to end up being superior, so to speak, end up having a lot of mastery over the domain. And that way you can have your cake and eat it too. That is that you can be superior without having to chase superiority. So that's what the topic was about. And I think it went well.